which is the very means of conquest, one should offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Lord Narayana, unto Narayana Rishi, the supremmost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, unto Sri Vyasdeva, the author. Nastakareshu abadveshu, Nastakareshu abadveshu, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, Bhagavati Uttama Shloke, Bhagavati Uttama Shloke, Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki, Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki. My regular attendance in classes on the Bhagavatam and by rendering of the service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed. And loving service unto the personality of God, who is praised, transcendental songs is established as an irrevocable fact. This is such a unique way to spend time reading and studying Bhagavatam. I like this, and it's so nice to hear so much of enthusiasm when you chant the verses. So thank you for having me here. This is the verse. Let's chant the verse today. Guru nasasya swajano nasasya, Guru nasasya swajano nasasya, Pita nasasya janani nasasya, Pita nasasya janani nasasya, Daivam natatsya napatischa sasya, Daivam natatsya napatischa sasya, Namo chayetya sampeta mrityum, Namo jayetya samupeta mrityum, Guru nasasya swajano nasasya, Guru nasasya swajano nasasya, Pita nasasya janani nasasya, Pita nasasya janani nasasya, Daivam natatsya napatischa sasya, Daivam natatsya napatischa sasya, Namo chayetya samupeta mrityum, Namo chayetya samupeta mrityum, Guru nasasya swajano nasasya, Guru nasasya swajano nasasya, Pita nasasya janani nasasya, Pita nasasya janani nasasya, Daivam natatsya napatischa sasya, Daivam natatsya napatischa sasya, Namo chayetya samupeta mrityum, Namo chayetya samupeta Pitana sasya jananina sasya.
Third line.
Devam natasya napatisha sasya.
Devam natasya napatisha sasya. Namo jayega samupeta mrityum. Guru nasasya swajano nasasya. Guru nasasya swajano nasasya. Pita nasasya janani nasasya.
Devim natasya napatisha sasya.
Devam natasya napatisha sasya. Namo jayagya samupeta mrityum. Guru nasasya swajano nasasya. Guru nasasya swajano nasasya. Pita nasasya janani nasasya.
Devam natasya napatisha sasya.
Devam natasya napatisha sasya.
Namo jayadya samupeda mrityam.
Namo jayagya samupeta mrityum. Guru nasasya swajano nasasya.
Pitana sasya janani nasasya.
Pita nasasya janani nasasya. Devam natasya napatisha sasya.
Namo jayadya samupeta mrityum.
Namo jayagya samupeta mrityum.
Guru nasasya swajano nasasya.
Guru nasasya swajano nasasya.
Pita nasasya janani nasasya.
Pita nasasya janani nasasya. Devam natasya napatisha sasya. Namo jayagya samupeta mrityum.
Let's read the synonyms. Guru,
Guru,
a spiritual master.
A spiritual master. Na,
not,
Saha,
Saha,
he, Sya,
Sya,
should become.
should become.
Swajanaha,
Swajanaha,
relative.
a relative.
Na,
Not,
Saha,
Saha,
such a person.
such a person.
Sya,
Sya,
should become.
Pita,
Pita,
a father.
Na,
Not,
Saha,
Saha,
he, Sya,
Sya,
should become.
Janani,
Janani,
a mother. Na, not, Sa, she, Sya, should become. Daivam, the worshipable deity. Na, not, that, Sya, should become. Na, not, Patihi,
a
a husband. Sha, also, Saha, he, Sya, should become. Na, not, Mochaye, can deliver. Yaha, who,
Samupeta Mrityu,
Samupreta Mrityum,
one who is on the path
One who is on the path
of repeated birth and death.
of repeated birth and death.
Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada.
Jai.
Please repeat the translation. One who cannot deliver
One
One
who
who
cannot
cannot
deliver
his dependence
his dependence
from the path
from the path
of repeated birth
of repeated birth
and death
and death
should never become
should never become
a spiritual master,
a spiritual master,
a father,
a
a husband,
husband,
a
a mother,
or a worshipable demigod.
or a worshipable demigod.
Let's hear the purport. There are many spiritual masters, but Rishabdev advises that one should not become a spiritual master if he is unable to save his disciple from the path of birth and death. Unless one is a pure devotee of Krishna, he cannot save himself from the path of repeated birth and death. Tyaktva deham punarjanma naiti mam ekaso arjuna. One can stop birth and death only by returning home back to Godhead. However, who can go back to Godhead unless he understands the Supreme Lord in truth? Janma karma chane divyam evam yo veti tattvatah. We have so many instances in history illustrating Rishabdev's instructions. Sukracharya was rejected by Bali Maharaj due to his inability to save Bali Maharaj from the path of repeated birth and death. Sukracharya was not a pure devotee. He was more or less inclined to fruitive activity, and he objected when Bali Maharaj promised to give everything to Lord Vishnu. Actually, one is supposed to give everything to the Lord because everything belongs to the Lord. Consequently, the Supreme Lord advises in Bhagavad Gita 9:27, Yat karosi yat asnasi yat chuhosi dadasi yat tapasyasi kamteya tat kurusva mat arpanam. O son of Kunti, all that you do, all that you eat, all that you offer and give away, as well as all austerities that you may perform, should be done as an offering unto me. This is bhakti. Unless one is devoted, he cannot give everything to the Supreme Lord. Unless one can do so, he cannot become a spiritual master, husband, father, or mother. Similarly, the wives of the Brahmanas who were performing sacrifices gave up their relatives just to satisfy Krishna. This is an example of a wife rejecting a husband who cannot deliver her from the impending dangers of birth and death. Similarly, Prahlad Maharaj rejected his father, and Bharat Maharaj rejected his mother, Janani Nisasya. The word Daivam indicates a demigod, or one who accepts worship from a dependent. Ordinarily, the spiritual master, husband, father, mother, or superior relative accepts worship from an inferior relative. But here, Rishabdev forbids this. First, the father, spiritual master, or husband must be able to release the dependent from repeated birth and death. If he cannot do this, he plunges himself into the ocean of reproachment for his unlawful activities. Everyone should be very responsible and take charge of his dependents, just as a spiritual master takes charge of his disciples, or a father takes charge of his son. All these responsibilities cannot be discharged honestly unless one can save the dependent from repeated birth and death. Jai Shri Prabhupada,
Jai.
Om Ajnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurumilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Sri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapidam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Paramaham Tadadi Swahadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Padam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sahajatam Sahadanam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sadhutam Varijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sangam Adhika Shri Vishaka Vidamscha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Deenabandhu Jayate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Varangi Radhe Vrindaveshwari Vishwamanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hare Nam Cha Vancha Kalpatruvyascha Kripa Sindhu Vyalecha Aditana Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Hare Rama 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 Hare Hare. So this is a beautiful verse. It's another verse from a very important chapter. The whole chapter of the 5th canto, 5th chapter is extremely important because you all know by now that Rishabdev, who is none other than a plenary portion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is giving very, very practical instructions to all his sons. And in this particular shloka, Rishabdev gives us a very sobering point about what should be the duty of what we call the guardian or the caregiver. He actually gives us here, he lists actually here, at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different roles that guardians would play in this world. Srila Prabhupada gave a very nice lecture on this actually in Vrindavan, I think sometime in November 1971. When you have time, after you've heard this verse, you should also take the time to read or hear Srila Prabhupada's lecture. Prabhupada actually used a very important word, the word I just used. He said that all these persons referred to in Bhagavatam, in this verse, they are actually known as guardians. And when you have someone who's a guardian, generally speaking, even in the material world, you tend to see them as someone who will guard, right? The word guardian comes from the word guard. In other words, they protect you and they give you some kind of shelter. That is the meaning of a guardian. And when you look at what Rishabdev is giving as guardians, the first person he describes is a spiritual master. And we all know now, right? I'm sure you all have been around long enough reading Srila Prabhupada's books about the importance of the spiritual master in our spiritual lives. We know that. The second guardian is considered to be the father. And the third, a husband. The fourth, a mother. And the fifth, a worshipable demigod. Now that doesn't mean that this is only exclusive to these 5 categories. Throughout Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada makes so many references to anyone who can guide someone in devotional service. So if you meet someone, right, who is actually senior in devotional service, and you find yourself inspired by him or her, and you take guidance from them, that person actually becomes a guardian. That's a very important point. And actually, when you think about it carefully, the logical extension of this verse is that one day all of you will also become guardians. Some of you may also have become guardians of sorts. You may be guiding younger devotees, newer devotees who are coming, and you have already a duty to them. That's why this verse is considered very important. If you have this book of Prabhupada shlokas, where Prabhupada quoted shlokas, this is one of the important shlokas that he quoted very often. Very often. So that's why this verse is considered to be a very seminal verse. Why is Rishabdev speaking about this verse to his sons now? Because you know that he's at the point where he's going to leave and he's going to renounce the world. And therefore he's using this as an opportunity to tell his sons that after I have renounced my duties as a guardian to all of you, it becomes your duty to become guardians to the rest of my kingdom. That's why he's saying that. And therefore that's the context that we must understand why he speaks this. Srila Prabhupada starts this point by saying, when he translates this, Rishabdev is saying a very important point. He says that no one can actually be considered to be a guardian. You cannot be considered to be a spiritual master, a father, a husband, a mother, or even a devata or a demigod, unless you qualify for one very important characteristic. You have the ability to deliver your dependent. In other words, you must not just deliver them. Delivering can be a very wide word. You can say, I'll deliver you from the street to the temple. That's delivery, isn't it?
Yes.
Right? Now, I came in a car, and Uday Prabhu delivered me from the car to the temple. Well, that's deliverance also. But there's a deeper meaning to the word delivery here. The word delivery here is to deliver one from the path of repeated birth and death. This is very important. And the path of repeated birth and death is actually a vast ocean. You all know that. It's a very difficult ocean to cross. And we have been coming into this world again and again and again. And therefore, every time that we come into this world, the ocean is still insurmountable. Therefore, what Rishabdev is saying If you are not confident of delivering someone from this great ocean of birth and death, then actually you don't have the adhikar. Adhikar means the right. You don't even have the ability to be able to, you cannot call yourself a spiritual master, a father, a husband, a mother, or even a devata, if you cannot do this. The question that comes to mind when I first read these words was, many of us may already be in this position. Some of us may be fathers. I'm a father, right? So I'm wondering whether, can I deliver them? I can't even deliver myself. How will I deliver them? Then, if I speak to my wife, she's a mother. And now she has to think of whether she's able to deliver her children. If you're a spiritual master, then it is a very serious business. Srila Prabhupada said, being a spiritual master is serious business. That's what he said. Because you have to deliver someone from the ocean of birth and death. And then, if you're a husband, for example, today everybody wants to get married. And when they get married, they're not cognizant of their duties, right? And when they're not cognizant of their duties, they think that marriage simply means you take care of me and I take care of you. But the word deliver is not there. And when they read this, if you've already become any of this, you wonder, what should I do? If you haven't become one of this, you start thinking, this is serious business. Therefore, this verse is very important, because it brings into us one quality that's required of a devotee. And that quality is known as diraha, right? The word diraha means one who is sober, sobriety. One who is sober is one who understands the purpose of life. And therefore, these guardians that Rishabdev is giving, the first qualification for them to even begin their duties as a guardian is that they should be cognizant of what the goal of life is. That's an important start, isn't it? And Bhagavatam tells us very clearly, I think it's the first canto, second chapter, Sabai Pumsam Palo Dharmo, Yathor Bhakti Rato Saji, Ahaitukhi Abhyati Hata, Vyayatma Suprasipati. So Krishna, Shukadeva Goswami makes it very clear what the goal of life is from the Bhagavatam standpoint. That we may have so many dharmas. You may be a father, you may be a husband, you could be a son, a daughter, a student, right? But we have one Parodharma, and that is known as Savai Pumsam Parodharma. And that Parodharma, which is a common denominator for all of us, is Yathor Bhakti Adok Saje. Our goal of life is to render devotional service to Krishna. So we should be very clear at the beginning what our goal of life is. Every time we come to the temple, every time we start the day, this goal of life should be clear. If the goal of life is not clear, then forget about delivering others. We can't even deliver ourselves. What to speak of others? So therefore, this devotional service, Bhagavatam says, must be performed in a certain way. It must be ahaitukhi aplati. That means when we perform devotional service to Krishna, we should perform it without fruitive mentality. In other words, there should be no tinge of material motive. So that's a very important start in our devotional service. Why am I coming to the temple? Why do I sing the beautiful bhajans and the kirtans of the temple? Why am I serving the deities? Is it because I want something from them which is material? Or is it that I am here as ahaitukhi aprityata? Should I come here with no personal interest? Or am I coming here with a subtle motive? I come from Singapore, right? And in Singapore, a few years ago, we had this young boy who started coming to the temple. And I remember asking him, Prabhu, you're coming to the temple so often. Is there a reason? Are you inspired? Do you like the kirtan? Do you like the devotees? And he was very honest with me. He said, Prabhu, I'm coming here because I'm hoping to find a good wife. And I said, okay. And I said, why? He said, because this is the best place to find a good wife. Any girl who's coming here obviously has her sights and priorities correct. So I'm coming here for a good wife. And I said, all right. At the same time, and this is amazing, there was a girl who was coming to the temple. And I remember my wife speaking to her, and she said, I've had some failed relationships, and I'm praying that Krishna will give me a nice boy. And by Krishna's arrangement, they both met in the temple. And by Krishna's arrangement and their desire, they got married. And by their own desire, after they got married, we never saw them again. We never saw them again. That was it. So therefore, Ahaituki Apratihata is very important. Before we can even deliver anyone, we have to be clear of the goal of life. And what is the goal of life? That when you come to the temple, when you render devotional service, at every juncture of your devotional service, we should introspect, why am I doing this? If I am doing this because my only motive is to please Krishna, to serve the devotees, in the beginning it may not be perfect, but Krishna is very kind. In the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, in one of the purports, Krishna is referred to by Srila Prabhupada as Bhava Grahi Janardana. Bhava Grahi Janardana means one who takes the essence of one's devotional mentality. Bali Maharaj was tied by Vasuki because he failed to deliver on his promise of 3 paces of land. You recall? And therefore, Vamandev was very upset with him transcendently. And Bali Maharaj, when he saw Vamandev, he actually wanted to bow before him because he was the Lord. But he was tied, and therefore he could not bow. But in his heart and his mind, he offered obeisances. And Krishna, as Vamandev, accepted the obeisances. And Prabhupada writes in that purport, even if in the beginning one is not perfect in his devotional service, but if the mood of devotional service is correct, Krishna takes that essence. When Putana came to kill Krishna, Krishna ignored the fact that she was a demoness. But because she came and she played the perfect part of a perfect mother, she had to be in disguise, right? She had to look the part to get through Nanda Maharaj's house. So she disguised herself as a beautiful gopi. And she pretended to be a devotee. It must have taken her quite a bit to pretend to be a devotee when her nature was to kill Krishna. But that effort, amazingly, was rewarded by the Lord. Because not only did she give him milk and he took the life out of her, but he made her a datri, a nurse after that, because she had actually attempted to perform some kind of activity in service to Krishna. Even though it was filled with material motive, Krishna accepted it. Now all of you are not Putanas. You're all coming here to do some service for Krishna. So if Putana can get that beautiful mercy of the Lord, be encouraged that you will also get his mercy. This is very important in our devotional life. We should not read this verse and say, my God, we are finished. We can never be any of these roles. Because of this now the brahmachari ashram will increase. Because no one will become husband, no one will become wife, nobody wants to be father, nobody wants to be mother. But the fact is, everyone has a role to play. Everyone. And even the brahmacharis are not spared. Because you will also be persons whom others will look up to. And I can see that is obviously the case. Right? That's the dynamics here. So therefore, the important way to come to this standard is first of all to recognize how are we performing our devotional service. Whatever we may have been yesterday, today we can change. We can start seeing Krishna without any material motive. Come here and do your service. Be happy to serve others. And when you are able to perform service without any material motive, ahaituki apratihata. Apratihata means Krishna will give you the benediction of performing your service uninterrupted. Sometimes people ask the question, which one should come first? Should I perform uninterrupted service, then I will do service without material motive? Prabhupada gives the answer. It's in the 6th canto, 16th chapter, 34th verse. It's in the purport. Okay? It's in the first paragraph of the purport. And Prabhupada gives a very good definition, very clear. He says 6:16:34. Okay? It's in the purport. Prabhupada says that if you are able to come to Krishna and perform devotional service without material motive, Krishna will then ensure that your devotional service is performed without interruption. Which means to say, Prabhupada Mataji, is that whenever you find that your devotional service is being interrupted, don't blame anyone. Don't blame anyone. Introspect on your own motive when you perform devotional service. Because if you want to really perform it without a tinge of material motive, Krishna will clear the path. He will never create obstacles in devotional service. Krishna is there to remove obstacles in devotional service. That we should have faith. And that is proven by all the great devotees. Look at Prahlad Maharaj. Nrsimhadev Chaturdasi is coming, isn't it? Prahlad Maharaj had no motive at all in performing bhakti. He didn't want name, fame, nothing. He only wanted to serve his dear Lord. And even though he was harassed like anything by his father, he remained steadfast. Because his motive was very clear to glorify the Lord, no matter how many obstacles Hiranyakashipu put, all these obstacles were cleared by the Lord's mercy. It was all cleared. Every devotee's life in Bhagavatam is testament to Savai Pumsam Paro Dharmo, Yatol Bhakti Adok Suje, Ahai Dukhi Akrati Yata, and the last line. Very important. You will know if you're performing devotional service in the correct way when you have the last line. Yayatma Suprasidati. Yayatma Suprasidati means that your heart is satisfied. You will feel that inner sense of satisfaction when you're performing the right kind of devotional service. And this one you don't need to go for a seminar. Everybody knows when they are satisfied, isn't it? If I put a plate of prasadam in front of you, you will know when you're satisfied. Nobody needs to teach you that. And when you perform devotional service well, you will know in your heart when you are peaceful. You will know when you are happy. Nobody can take that away from you. So you see how practical Bhagavatam is. It tells you the goal of life. It tells you how to reach the goal of life. And it also tells you the symptom just to make sure you know you're on the path towards the goal of life. There is no other scripture that gives us this. And that's why Bhagavatam is so powerful. So this is the thing that we must understand. And therefore Prabhupada says in the purport, unless one becomes a pure devotee of Krishna, he cannot save himself from the path of repeated birth and death. Now we may ask ourselves, how to become a pure devotee? That's a tall order. What is purity then? It's very difficult to understand it sometimes. At one point of time, Srila Prabhupada in his letter, he was asked, how advanced are your disciples? And Prabhupada famously wrote, all my disciples are pure devotees. All my disciples are pure devotees. Prabhupada writes that. And then one time Prabhupada was also asked this question, because the devotee came to Prabhupada and he was finding fault with everyone, right? And then Prabhupada said, and Prabhupada used the word rascal like 100 million times, isn't it? So Prabhupada said, rascal, except for you, everyone else is a pure devotee. And that was a very sobering thing also. In another very important, in a discussion, I think it was in Los Angeles, and I think it was November 25th, 1968, Srila Prabhupada gave a very beautiful point on purity. And that has been captured actually in database. And I want to read to you that point because it makes it very easy for us to understand what purity means. Otherwise, sometimes we think it is a lofty concept, and that means it is unattainable. But no, Prabhupada wanted all his devotees, all devotees who come to the movement, to become pure devotees. Please remember that. Prabhupada wanted everyone. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu wanted everyone to go out and preach Krishna consciousness, and he wanted everyone to become spiritual masters. So therefore, purity is not an unattainable concept, but there is a way to develop purity. Srila Prabhupada says this, and I will read it out. We may not be 100% perfect, but as far as possible, if we follow the instructions as it is, that much is perfect. In this way, one will get perfection. So following the instructions of the spiritual master, the sastras, and making sure we are aligned to Guru, Sadhu, and Sastra is very important. Next point, Prabhupada says, so one has to follow. If you want to deliver your dependence, you have to first follow. That's very important. Remember, Prabhupada said the qualification of a bona fide spiritual master is that he is a sincere disciple of his spiritual master. So Prabhupada says here, so one has to follow. The same example, try to understand that a perfect expert technologist or technician or mechanic is working, and someone is working under his instruction. So instruction of the expert, he is also expert. He may not be 100% expert, but his work is expert. Is that clear? Because he's working under the expert. Do you follow? Is what Srila Prabhupada is saying. So, if you follow pure devotee, then you are also pure devotee. Full stop. It may not be one is 100% pure, because we are trying to raise ourselves from the conditional life. But if we strictly follow the pure devotee, then we are also pure devotee. So far we do, that is pure. So pure devotee does not mean one has to become immediately 100% pure. But if he sticks to the principle that will follow a pure devotee, then his actions, he is as good as pure devotee. That is, it is not that I'm explaining in my own way. Srila Prabhupada now brings that point to the end. He says, it is the explanation of Bhagavata. Mahajano yena gataha sapantaha. You know, this is a very famous shloka, isn't it? That states in the 6th canto that we follow the footsteps of the Mahajans. That is how we become pure. And the greatest and easiest way to follow this purity of the movement is to come within the disciplic succession. Come within Parampara. Be chaste to the devotional service. You know, chastity is such an important concept, right? Even in material world, chastity is still valued. It may not be so valued as it was before, but still people respect chastity. But chastity actually begins in the spiritual world. Avyavicharena. Avyavicharena means that we don't go here or there. We are only with Krishna. Tasmat epyena manasaha. Bhagavan satvata pratiti. To take the protection of Krishna, be one-pointed in your devotion service. That will ensure that there is purity coming into our hearts. You know, in the Mahabharata, there's a very famous story. Arjuna, the Pandavas and the Kauravas, Dronacharya wanted to test their archery skills. So he set up an archery skill contest. He had a branch of a tree high up. He put a target, right? It was the eye of a parrot. It wasn't a real parrot, but it was up there as a target. So he called Yudhishthira Maharaj and he said, Maharaj, please shoot now, right, at the target. Now, Yudhishthira pulled the bow and the arrow right up to its point, and he was about to release it when Dronacharya said, wait, let me ask you something. What do you see? And Yudhishthira said, Maharaj, Dronacharya, Guru, I actually see the eye of the bird. Good. Do you see anything else? Yes, I see the bird. Very good. What else do you see? I see the branch of the tree on which the bird is. Very good. You have failed. Now please go. So Yudhishthira Maharaj was a bit bewildered. Now Duryodhan comes forward. And Dronacharya says, Duryodhan, pull back your arrow and tell me what you see. And Duryodhan thought, now Yudhishthira Maharaj said like about 4 things that he saw. I have to make sure I see a lot more. So he said, well, I see the eye, you know, Dronacharya, I see the bird, I see the branch, I see the tree, I see the flowers in the tree, I see the forest, I see the sky. And Dronacharya said, you are definitely a failure. So now please stop, you go. And after everyone finished, there was Arjuna. And Dronacharya asked Arjuna, Arjuna, what do you see? And Arjuna said, I see the eye. No, tell me what else do you see? And he said, Dronacharya, I only see the eye. Tell me if you see anything else. I see only the eye. And Dronacharya said, now shoot the arrow. And the arrow found its target. This is Avyavicharena. This is Avyavicharena. This is what Prabhupada said, to be bhakti. If we can develop this bhakti in our hearts, even if we have a desire to do it, Krishna will fulfill that desire. Remember one thing, we all cannot be desireless. In the same purport of 6.16.34, Srila Prabhupada says, a living entity cannot be desireless. But desires that cannot be fulfilled, right, are what we call lusty desires. Very, very powerful statement by Srila Prabhupada. Which means we all have desires. Even as we sit now, you must be having some desire. When is he stopping? When am I going to have prasad? So many desires go through our eyes and our ears and our senses and our mind. But the important thing is how we channel our desires. So therefore, Krishna consciousness is very dynamic. And if we want to come to the stage of purity, then we should pray to Krishna and we should have the determination and the chastity to direct our desires to serve the Lord. Very simple. You have a choice. You can either serve your mind or you can serve the Lord. If you serve the mind, then the mind grows more and more powerful. Look at the 5th canto, 11th chapter, 17th verse. Are you putting it up here? Oh, great, okay. Let's look at that verse, 5, 11, 17. It's the last verse of the 11th chapter of the 5th canto. And it's the shortest chapter in Srimad Bhagavatam. But if you ever want to study the mind as an extension of the Bhagavad Gita, 5th chapter, then you look at this chapter. And look at the last verse, 5, 11, 17. Brata Vyaminam Tadavajramidhyam Upekshaya Adheditam Akramattaha Guru Harihi Charanapashanashro Jahi Vyadikam Swayamatmamosham. Beautiful verse. Now look at the translation. This is the advice given by Jadabharat to King Rahugana. And he says, this uncontrolled mind is the greatest enemy of the living entity. If one neglects it or gives it a chance, it will grow more and more powerful. This is something we must be very wary of. And it will become victorious. Although it is not factual, it is very strong. If you did a post-mortem on yourself now, assuming you were dead, you wouldn't be able to find the mind. You'd find the brain, but you wouldn't be able to pinpoint the mind. It is not factual in the sense of being gross, but it is very powerful because it is subtle. But here it is very nicely stated. This is the advice. O king, please try to conquer this mind by the weapon of service to the lotus feet of the spiritual master and to the Supreme Personality of God. So if we want to deliver anyone from the repeated cycle of birth and death, we should be very clear to control this mind in such a way that we develop the service mood to the spiritual master and to the Supreme Personality of God. And how does he end? He says, do this with great care. How nice. Do this with great care. And this is how we should do it. If we don't, then Prabhupada ends the purport by saying that if we do not control our senses and become instruments for the Lord, then nobody can depend on us for Krishna consciousness. And we will do people a great disservice. Imagine you are caught in the net. You're a fish. I'm a fish. I come to you in the net and say, don't worry, I'll deliver you from the net. You will laugh at me because I'm caught in the net and you are caught in the net and I'm telling you I will deliver you. How can I deliver you if I'm also caught? How can I give you $6 when I only have $5 in my pocket? The Guru can only deliver the disciple up to the extent of his purity. He cannot do it more than that. And that's why a Guru's duty is to be as pure in intention and bhakti as possible, so that he becomes an instrument in the hands of the Lord to deliver those who depend on him. Do you know how much effort you put into your heart when you depend on someone to deliver you? Forget the person who's delivering you. Those who are dependent, they put their heart, their soul, they put their blood, their sweat, they put everything, their trust, everything into you. Is it not our duty then to ensure that we do not let them down? That is why in spiritual life, exploitation of this situation is very dangerous. Sukracharya exploited his situation. He thought that I'm going to be compromised if Bali gives up everything. Because he thought, wait a minute, if Bali gives up everything, what is going to be, I will be on the street. He won't be able to pay me. That was his only reason to be a spiritual master. And therefore Bali rejected him. One who stops you from remembering Krishna, how can you depend on that person? A golden rule is those who help you to remember Krishna, you please take their association. They can be in any situation in life, any ashram. But if they can do something that makes you inspired, you can remember Krishna, you go home happier, more energized, they are the persons who can deliver you. They may not be delivering you immediately, but they have started the process. So Sukracharya is an example we don't want. Another example that we don't want are actually the Brahmanas who were actually the husbands to the Brahmanas' wives. There they were sitting down and doing the fire sacrifice. And who should be the beneficiary of the sacrifice? It should be Yajnapati. But when Balaram and the boys came and said, please give us some prasad, they shoot them away. It's like, it's like this lady, this old lady Prabhupada said, who was always praying to Krishna. And she was carrying firewood on her head. And then one day the firewood all fell. And she said, oh Krishna. And Krishna came before her and said, ask me anything. Of course, when you see Krishna, I hope we will ask for love of God. But she said, can you gather all that stick and put it back on my head, please? And that was it. And so the Brahmanas had the chance to be with Krishna, but they missed it. But when Krishna said, let's go to the wives, they may not have been educated as the Brahmanas, but they had the right education. They knew the goal of life. And therefore, whatever that was going to be offered in Yajnapati, they offered everything to Krishna. This is the mood of the devotee. And Prahlad Maharaj rejected his father because what is the point of a father who could not accept the supremacy of the Lord? But even if he rejected his father, he was never rude to his father. I say this because sometimes when we take up Krishna consciousness, we may come from families where they are not Krishna conscious. That doesn't mean you go and tell your parents, you are in Maya, you are useless, you die. I remember when I was 13, I was introduced to Krishna consciousness in 1983. I was 13 then, right? I'm 54 now, I was 13 then. And I remember I was so fired up. And when Prabhupada said, the world is in Maya and they can't remember, I was going to go and tell my parents that when a good devotee puts common sense into my head and said, please don't do that with your parents, right? Because whatever it is, be grateful for the fact that you've got this human body from them. And that advice was so good. Today, because I never resorted to such fanaticism, my parents, they're 85 and 84 years old. They're chanting 16 rounds, they embrace Krishna consciousness, all because of their very saintly advice. So, we should be very careful that when we take up Krishna consciousness, that we must become a source of inspiration to others and not a source of disturbance to others. Our families may not take up Krishna consciousness, but if we become the best devotees that we are, we become ambassadors to Krishna consciousness. If your garden is in order and your neighbor looks at your garden and you don't say anything, one day he's going to say, hey, how did you get your garden in order? That's the time you share Krishna consciousness with him. Up till then, behavior is the best way to attract people to Krishna consciousness. And your behavior will determine how others depend on you in Krishna consciousness. And your purity will inspire people to come to Krishna consciousness. Jai Bhantara Srimad Bhagavatam. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Ananta Kori Vaishnavinda ki Jai. Thank you, Prabhu and Mahis. Thank you very much. Such a wonderful time to associate with you. I don't know what the time is, I don't know whether I've exceeded. I'm sorry if I did, but there was so much.
We're on time.